he is very much enjoying his moment in the sun. He is essentially back on the campaign trail, and he's going around the country, and yes, he's going to red states and talking to Trump voters, basically pointing out that Trump deceived them and the Democratic Party is really going to be their ally. But really, is the Democratic Party going to be their ally? I would contend not. And something just happened this week that I was very disappointed in Bernie about, and that is the special election in Kansas. In Wichita, there was a special election because Mike Pompeo, who was the Republican congressman from there, was just appointed to be the director of the CIA. So his seat was vacated. I was first made aware of this election in mid-February by a friend of mine, Janice Bradley, who lives in Wichita, and she wanted to know if I could help her with this guy, James Thompson, if I could find any, large donors or Bernie groups where she could post about him, because he's a civil rights attorney who she met at Occupy Wichita, and he was defending a lot of victims of police brutality. And what happened was that there were two Democrats, and one of them was a guy by the name of Dennis McKinney, and he is the former state treasurer. And actually what happened was Bernie delegates and Hillary delegates banded together to support Thompson over McKinney, because McKinney is anti-choice and anti-LGBT. So the Hillary delegates and the Bernie delegates managed to join behind this guy, but nobody else did, specifically the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the arm of the Democratic Party that is supposed to support Democratic congressional candidates. So here was a guy, okay, Pompeo, this is a Republican district. This is the headquarters, Wichita, Kansas is the headquarters of the Koch brothers. And the Koch brothers were supporting the Republican in the race, the current state treasurer, Ron Estes. So this is a district that Pompeo won the last election. He got 60.7% of the vote, and the Democrat got 29.6%. So fast forward to Tuesday, Thompson got 46%. Okay, so that's almost a 20-point bump from the last time, showing that this election was winnable. Now, the Republican Party got nervous, and in the last minute, they came in with their big guns. Paul Ryan sent a fundraising email. Mike Pence made robocalls. Donald Trump tweeted, and they spent money. The Republican Congressional Committee and the GOP allies put money into ads and mailers, basically lying about James Thompson in these last few days. And the Democratic, the DCCC did nothing. They didn't spend a dime in this race. And also, I'm told that the Kansas Democratic Party didn't even spend $20,000 for a mailer for Thompson. So what we find is the Democrats failed once again, an epic fail on the part of the Democratic Party. But I have to take this back to Bernie, because Bernie was in Topeka, Kansas at the end of February, and he made a rousing one-hour speech. Now, I just listened to this speech because I wanted to hear, was Bernie going to endorse this guy? Was he going to talk about how Kansas needed to band together and support this guy? No, not once during this hour speech that I just listened to did Bernie Sanders mention James Thompson or his candidacy. Now, I was told that James Thompson introduced him, but that doesn't excuse the fact that Bernie didn't endorse him and, tell people that they needed to work for him. Our Revolution endorsed James Thompson, which is great. Our Revolution endorsing a candidate is not the same as Bernie Sanders endorsing a candidate. Bernie Sanders should have written a letter to his entire email list, looking for money for this guy, looking for phone bankers for this guy, looking for canvassers for this guy. He did not do it. Bernie Sanders should have used his television show last week, instead of interviewing Jane Mayer, who writes about the Koch brothers right there in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas. He should have interviewed James Thompson, okay, who is taking on the Koch brothers. I criticize Bernie very lovingly. What I've noticed is that over the years, he likes to give the speech. He gives the speech in the Senate when the C-SPAN cameras are trained on him, and we have no idea that there's nobody else in that room. He's basically giving the speech to an empty audience. So then he runs for president, and he's now giving the speech to crowds of 10, 20, 30,000 people. And this is great. I love the fact that Bernie Sanders, like the Occupy movement, basically changed the national conversation as to what are the important problems facing our country. But it's not enough to talk about the problems. We have to have solutions. Now, Bernie Sanders went the Occupy movement one step better. He actually has legislative solutions. But once you have legislative solutions, such as single-payer Medicare for all, or free public college and universities, or, $15 minimum wage, or banning fracking, you then have to build power behind it. And Bernie Sanders is not known as one in the Senate who gets people to co-sponsor his bills or has any position in leadership to whip support. So now that he has this made-up position called Director of Outreach, how is he using it? He seems to be using it now. The latest thing is he's going on this tour across the country with Tom Perez. And what's the point? If he goes on tour and makes this 1-hour speech, the same speech that he was making during the campaign, what is the good of it? If he doesn't put his muscle behind the legislation that he's introducing, we're here working in California, going to every single Democratic congressperson's town hall that we can find who has not signed on to John Conyers' bill, Medicare for All. We were able to get Maxine Waters to come out the other night, commit to being a co-sponsor of H.R. 676. And a couple of days later, we were able to get Linda Sanchez to basically admit that she had no intention of being a co-sponsor. So then we post that, and Melanie Oranger, who is a Bernie-crat from Maryland, proceeds to take the live streams, make a videotape from the live streams, 30-second spot of Maxine saying she'll sign on, which I then tweet to her saying thank you, and a 4-minute one of Linda Sanchez dancing around why she's not going to sign, which I then tweet to her and with some shaming comment. And this is what we need to be doing. Okay, so we as a movement are doing our part. But what is our leader doing? Our leader is out there making the same speech. And we've got situations here in Los Angeles, and I'm sure this plays out across the country, where we are disunited, where we don't know where to go from here. I really feel that Bernie needs to do two things. One, he needs to build support for his legislation. He should be asking us to go out and get support for single payer. I'll tell you what Indivisible is doing. Indivisible and Move On are out trying to save the ACA, which is a Republican program created by the right-wing Heritage Foundation, first proposed by Republican Senator Bob Dole, and then implemented in Massachusetts by Republican Governor Mitt Romney. And this is the program that, Indivisible and Move On had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people call their congressional offices to try to save. Now, why are we saving a program called the Affordable Care Act that nobody can afford to use? We have a great opportunity here at this time in history where Trump is trying to repeal and replace Obamacare. So why isn't the call, great, let's repeal and replace it with Medicare for all? That's what we need in this country. We're the only advanced industrialized country that does not provide health care as a human right to all citizens. And they're trying to save this corporate program that big health insurance and big pharma love because they have now required that Americans, that all Americans buy a private product. Think about that. If that is not the ultimate neoliberal wet dream, I don't know what is. So Bernie needs to be he needs to be doing his show about John Conyers' bill. I called the aide of Linda Sanchez, and I said, in her comments, she said we have to pick our battles. So our battle, first of all, I said, why does co-sponsoring this bill affect her effort to save the ACA, assuming that I even think that's the right thing to do? Why does her co-sponsoring this bill harm that effort? I want to know the answer to that. And second of all, if she's picking her battles, why doesn't she pick the battle that the vast majority of American people want, which is Medicare for all? So she said, well, you can feel free to set up a meeting with me and any of her constituents and we'll discuss this. So that's what we need to do. We need to have meetings with these legislators. We need to go to their town halls. We need to tweet them. We need to post on their Facebook posts what we want them to do. And we need to tell certain of them, like Adam Schiff and Ted Lieu, my own congressman, to stop making their career in the Democratic Party off of red baiting, okay? Basically, they are going on every talk show and every cable news show that will have them on, talking about Russia, 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 and basically what that did was that baited Donald Trump into attacking Syria. His statement that he made last Friday, in which he called Assad a brutal dictator who has used chemical weapons on his own people and is a war criminal. Okay, that statement is wrong on so many levels. First of all, he's not a dictator. He was elected democratically by his people. Second of all, he is, if he's a war criminal, then what does that make us? We're using like white phosphorus and depleted uranium over there and in other countries. We also don't know that he in fact used chemical weapons. There's a lot of people who think that it was the al-Nusra Front, the moderate rebels. We used to call them terrorists until 2014 when we decided to interject ourselves into this civil war. They used to be terrorists, but then they became moderate rebels because now we're supporting them. But the al-Nusra Front is really an outgrowth of al-Qaeda. And truth be told, it is Assad and Russia who are fighting the terrorists. The white helmets are not what they appear to be. It is a crime that they won the Oscar for Best Short Documentary. They, in fact, are a front for a regime change operation. They're being funded by a guy named Ayman Asfari, who is the CEO of a British company called Petrofrac. They are smuggling in weapons to rearm the al-Nusra Front from Turkey, okay? This is what's really happening. If you listen to independent journalists like Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley, they will tell you that Assad enjoys the support of his own people. One fact that I will repeat is that if Assad was gassing his own people, then why would 90% of the people fleeing Aleppo go to government-controlled areas? Now, as far as this attack, a lot of people think that the al-Nusra Front did it to try to put the blame on Assad, but Assad would have no reason to do this. He was winning the war, he's winning the civil war, and he would have no reason to antagonize the United States. Lawrence Wilkerson was on The Real News with Paul Jay a few days ago, and his contention is that Assad did bomb a factory, but in that factory there were some chemical weapons or phosphates used for agriculture. And when those weapons or phosphates were hit with the bombs, they exploded and dissipated to areas far and wide, and 4 people were killed. So that is very different than gassing your own people with chemical weapons. And people like Adam Schiff and Ted Lieu, and even Maxine Waters, who's off on a big impeachment kick herself, ought to be calling for independent investigations of this. Did they not learn their lesson after 9/11 and the weapons of mass destruction? It is absolutely outrageous that we have supposedly liberal Democratic congressmen out there fomenting the propaganda of the deep state. And the deep state wants us to get in a war with Russia so badly it's not even funny. You can read, I encourage everybody to read Consortium News, which is edited by Robert Parry. And Robert Parry was the award-winning journalist who broke the Iran-Contragate story for the Associated Press in the 1980s. So he is basically saying that we want a war with Russia because fighting guerrilla terrorist groups is not very lucrative for the weapons manufacturers. And it should be known that Raytheon is a huge contributor to Adam Schiff. Tulsi Gabbard is the only one with the good sense to be questioning the intelligence. So Bernie, to me, he is not out there doing what Ted Lieu is doing, or Adam Schiff or Rachel Maddow. Don't get me wrong. I'm not accusing Bernie of being a warmonger. Bernie is not a warmonger, okay? What I think about Bernie is that he is not interested in foreign policy. He never has been. He's never challenged imperialism. You know, he did vote against the Iraq war, but he's voted for every other war, and he's voted for war funding. And he did make the same kind of comments about Muammar Gaddafi, who is another person who enjoyed the support of his own people. And Muammar Gaddafi was ousted because he started talking about getting off the petrodollar and doing a pan-African currency based on Libyan gold and silver. So that's why they ousted, you know, Gaddafi. And you just have to understand history to understand that we support all these guys. We were working with Gaddafi. We've been working, well, we haven't worked with Assad because Assad has never wanted to work with us. And that's why the CIA has been trying to overthrow him since 1949. But Bernie doesn't ever talk about this because Bernie's interested in domestic policy. And I'm interested mostly in domestic policy, but I learn about this stuff when the focus comes onto it, so that we have to not pay attention to domestic policies because we're all about war. So what happened was, and Norman Solomon did a great article in The Nation basically saying what I've been saying for the last 6 months, which is that all this red baiting and trying to connect Donald Trump to Russia and Putin basically caused him to try to prove, you know, look what I did. I'm not connected with Trump. I mean, with Putin. And even Eric Trump, his idiot son, said the same thing 2 days ago. Bernie is a very good voice for our causes, especially our domestic causes. He's the best one we have out there. But I do not feel that I personally could support someone who, because he personally is not interested in foreign affairs, does not take the time to do the basic analysis that most of his supporters have done to question the deep state propaganda. I don't think the Democratic Party can be reformed, at least on the national level. I do support the effort to reform, or take over, I should say, the Democratic Party here in California, and I think the Bernie-crats are going to be able to do that if we can unify. And I think we need to unify on some strategic issues. I think if we can all stop looking at ourselves as, you know, Democrats or Greens, or, you know, even just our single issue movement that we're supporting. And that's the other thing that we have to do. We have to get out of our silos, because one thing about the Occupy movement and the Bernie Sanders movement, it brought all these progressive causes together, and we were able to work together. And without some unifying force like that, we're now all back in our silos. I think we can get single payer in California. I think we can get Los Angeles to divest from Wells Fargo. I think we can shut down Aliso Canyon gas storage facility, where we had the largest methane leak in history last October. And the reason we can get that is that we have coalitions that are being built around those issues with very experienced strategic organizers that know how to build power. They know how to identify the targets and figure out who our allies are, who our supporters are. They've got different tactics that they're employing. And I feel that if we pick things that we can win, we will boost the morale of the people in the movement, and we can grow our movement. Please subscribe to me on YouTube, and on Twitter, I'm Lauren_Steiner. And on Facebook, I do most of my live streams, all my commentaries from my page. I do my show, The Robust Opposition, from my page. And I've been doing a lot of live streams of big marches and rallies from the March and Rally Los Angeles page. Have a great rest of your day and evening, folks, and I'll see you next time.